penis is not a toy. Your womb is not a burden. They were made with a purpose, and that purpose is part of your gender assignment. So I want to break down a little bit this idea, this tidal wave. This idea really has been in the culture forever. Even it was there before Christianity. It is what Christianity ended. It's what Socrates ended. Materialism, moral relativism, cultural constructs. These are not new ideas. The idea that morality is, or your gender is just a cultural construct. They were swept away ultimately by the triumph of Christianity, which, remember, Christianity brought with it certain classical philosophies as well, like Stoicism and Platonism and things. They actually became part of Christianity, and it was now like a sort of chalice that carried this wine in it. And, Herodotus, if you've ever read, great historian, ancient Greek historian, said culture is king. Pontius Pilate, you all know, said, what is truth? Meaning, who can tell what truth is? The Sophists, who were the opponents of Socrates, they said there is no truth. And again, Christ and Socrates were the stones that were thrown away. They were the odd men out, the people talking against the culture, who became the cornerstone of the temple of Western civilization. They said there is truth. It's difficult to know, but you can find it through telling parables, by asking questions. You can come close to it. We never reach the truth, but we come closer and closer to it. So I spent a lot of this week, in a tiny little booth the size of an outhouse, recording the audiobook of my book that's out in May, The Kingdom of Cain. And, like I said, I do want you all to go out and pre-order it, please. It's one of the most, I think, is one of the best things I've ever written, The Kingdom of Cain, Finding God in the Literature of Darkness. But I don't want to plug it for months, but I do want to talk about this experience, because it's a funny experience recording an audiobook. It's the only time you get to hear your writing as other people will hear it. I don't know what psychological factors come into play, but somehow when you're performing the book for other people, even though I read everything out loud, even though I rewrite everything 100 times, when I perform it for other people in this little booth, suddenly I hear, oh, this is what people are going to hear. And the book is a study I've told you before, it's a study of three and how they inspired novels and movies. So, for instance, one of them is Ed Gein, who's crazy, inspired Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Silence of the Lambs. And all of these slasher films grow out of Ed Gein. And I talk about what these movies and what this movement through the arts tells us about violence and sex and gender roles and all these things, and psychiatry and lots of other things. But it's also a personal book, especially in the second part of it, about my own journey from madness to sanity, and from sanity to Christianity and to joy, and the person that you see in front of you, who is obviously maybe mad in a good way, but is not mad in the way that I was when I was young. And I talk about the ideas and rituals and practices that I feel provide joy and wisdom in a world that is, in fact, full of evil and darkness. And so at one point, I'm just talking about reading this book, the audiobook, and at one point I'm talking about Sigmund Freud and his idea that he was part of the move toward materialism, toward bringing everything inward. All these spiritual things that we thought were angels and demons and God. No, they weren't out there. They were in us. They were just in us. And they were all actually physical experiences. They were born out of our sexual desires, our desire for pleasure, our fear of pain. So, for instance, Freud said, well, God is just our Father projected onto the heavens, and our drive to create art is really the sexual drive that's been repressed and redirected. And so the corollary of this, the reasonable corollary, as I say, ideas work themselves out to their logical conclusion, is that we don't really know ourselves. We're deceived about ourselves. We think we're worshiping God, but no, we're just projecting our fathers onto the heavens. We think we're experiencing the ecstasy of a connection with God, but no, it's really just repressed sexual feelings coming to the surface. And the psychiatrist now becomes the shaman who undeceives you, who tells you you think you're seeing this, but what you're really seeing is this. Now, C.S. Lewis, who was never accepted at the level that Freud was, but was obviously a much greater genius, I think, had this, and Freud was a genius, but he was wrong. But C.S. Lewis was right and a genius, which maybe makes him sound smarter. He had this brilliant idea that he called transposition, where he said, no, it's not that our feeling of bliss in the presence of God is just sexuality transformed. It's that the body has to transpose every experience into itself. So, I'm sure you've maybe seen the statue of St. Teresa of Avila sort of reacting in ecstasy as this angel takes an arrow and stabs it into her belly. This is a statue that was declared so obscene that the Victorian critics wanted it destroyed, right? And they thought, well, this is just a picture of her having sex, but it actually is St. Teresa's actual description made into a sculpture. This is the way she described it. But what C.S. Lewis said is the body is using sexual language to tell us about a spiritual experience. He said it's like a piano playing a symphony. The piano only has a certain kind of note, but those notes have to represent violins and woodwinds and all the parts of a symphony when it's playing a symphony. And our body is like that. It's a small instrument that has to play great spiritual things. And he said Christianity is like the sun because you don't just see the sun, you see everything by it. This is how you understand it. So here's a great idea. Put all your passwords and credit card numbers on a giant billboard for the whole world to see. Oh, wait, that's a stupid idea. And yet, that's basically what you're doing every time you go online without ExpressVPN. I get this. You probably think you're fine because you're careful online. But here's the thing. It literally takes a 12-year-old with some cheap hardware to hack into your data when you're using public Wi-Fi. While you're sipping your overpriced latte, and shame on you, little Tommy could be stealing your bank login info, and shame on him. And guess what? Your data is worth up to $1,000 on the dark web. So you're basically leaving free money on the table for hackers. That's why I never go online without ExpressVPN. I use it all the time on all my devices. It just gives you peace of mind because I work in coffee shops sometimes and I work outdoors and in hotels a lot of times. And the thing is, this is just so ridiculously easy to use. It's got one big button. It says on, and that's it. Even my technologically challenged friends like me, who still type with one finger like me, could figure it out. It works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, whatever you've got. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Klavan. That's expressvpn.com/Klavan, and you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/sing it.
There are no easy things.
The thing about Christianity is, churches have all these rules and they have these theologies and these orthodoxies. And those are really important because without them, churches become corrupt. But those are a map. The map is not the territory. I'm sure you've heard that expression. The map is not the territory. Church orthodoxies, church rules, religious rules, theologies, they're the map. But Jesus is the territory. And so when you have stories in the Bible in which Jesus breaks the rules, don't ignore that. It's not that he's saying you can break any rule. What he's saying is you are an instrument, not the person in front of you, but that person deep down inside you that you're supposed to be is the instrument. So he tells you if you want to get into heaven, don't commit adultery. But then when he sees the adulteress, not only does he keep the people from stoning her, he says, I do not condemn you. I do not condemn. And conservatives love to say, so he says, sin no more. He says this, and they want to get right back to the rules. That's what conservatives want to do. And what leftists want to do is they want to get rid of the rules altogether. But that's not what Christ is saying. He's saying the rules of the map, but I am the territory, and I am full of forgiveness and love and compassion and understanding. So the left has because it's been dominant, and when the right becomes dominant in power, they'll abuse power because it's power is the problem, really. But the left has used their power to get rid of all these rules. So let me remind you of some of the things that they have tried to get us to forget. There is a person that you are meant to be that you are not yet. You know this. You know this. You do not want to be yourself. When anybody ever says, be yourself, no, you want to be the self God made you to be, the image of God that is within you. This is the territory, not the map. You have responsibilities that are inherent in your gender. Your penis is not a toy. Your womb is not a burden. They were made with a purpose, and that purpose is part of your gender assignment, which does not come from the doctor, it does not come from the Senate, it does not come from academia, it comes from God. The world is another thing. The world operates on practical principles. It's going to do that. But sometimes personal morality opposes those principles, and you have to pay a price for being moral because the world doesn't like it when you're moral. Jesus paid a price for being moral they killed him, right? That's why the whole world killed him in the guise of the people who happened to be around him. Capitalism and free trade and democracy all use practical principles that are not necessarily Christian. They play off our love of gold, our love of gain, our ambitions, our desire to defeat our opposition. And sometimes you as an individual have to say, my company's not going to do that. It's going to cost me some money. It's going to cost me, if I'm on the air, it's going to cost me some listeners. I'm going to do the right thing. But you can't ask other people to pay that price. You have to pay that price. Immigration is not hospitality. Taxation is not charity. These things are individual virtues. That's why we believe in freedom and less government. And we know these things. And most of all, we know that we have to negotiate this world with all its gray areas and pitfalls, but that there is another world, another kingdom where all our suffering here and the things that can't be reconciled and the things that are all gray areas make sense. The churches make the rules, but Jesus is the territory. He is the way that we guide ourselves through those rules. So our job is to follow the rules until we can't. Worship, follow the Sabbath until good means don't follow the Sabbath. Seek out the person that we're meant to be. And that means we know who that is. We know that a man has to have integrity. We know that a woman has to have generosity. We know that a husband is a person of responsibility. A wife is a person of grace and generosity. We know that a father has to bring justice and a mother has to bring mercy. And we know that the image of God is reflected to people who love you and depend on you, and we have to fulfill that image. And we all know this. We all know who we're supposed to be. There's wiggle room. There are exceptions to every rule. There's things we do that may break the rules. But if you're a woman with a body count in the 20s and 30s and hundreds, you know you have degraded the womanhood in you that is the image of God. If you're a man whacking off to you know you have degraded the image of God in you. And when we're talked out of God, when we were talked out of God, we were talked out of self-knowledge by a bad idea. That bad idea's time has passed. Our time has come. I love that guy. If you want more of him, like and subscribe. And if you want even more, subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show, wherever you get your podcasts.